Hello everyone, Tutu Mora here with the Y, bringing you tools to feel well in your body, mind, and spirit. Today we're going to be doing a full movement class, so a Pilates-based movement class, and we're going to be using a prop today. So I've got kind of this like half deflated ball. It's going to offer us a little instability to challenge stability. It's going to offer us a little movement for the spine. And so if you don't have this prop with you, I'm just gonna invite you to grab like a small blanket or a small pillow that's gonna offer you some give while still being slightly supportive. So take a moment, find what you need. I'll meet you down here on the mat, and we're gonna have this handy without needing to use it right away. Have it in a place where you can pick it up when you need it. And let's go ahead and lay on down. So we're gonna start just with the knees bent, feet flat on the mat, and taking a couple deep breaths. Just letting your spine settle. And thinking about your rib cage like it's a barrel so that we can breathe full side to side, front to back, deepening down. And let's bring arms up and overhead. Just finding your natural range of motion and bringing arms all the way back down to meet the mat. And let's take that a few times. And on the way up, let's pause at the top. We're going to bring thumbs to the palms, spreading the other fingers nice and wide, and we're going to open arms out into a T. Find your full wingspan here. Take a deep breath. And guiding the arms all the way back in, resting heavy through the shoulders. Let's release the thumbs and take that to the index finger. Same thing, opening wide. Middle finger. Ring finger. And pinky finger. And let's relax all the fingers, open arms wide out to the side, and we're gonna start a spine twist. So we're gonna drop into one half of the pelvis, letting your knees follow along, and dropping into the lifted half of your pelvis to come back through center and over to the other side. And let's take that back and forth. One more time here to each side, just finding that natural range of movement for each side without it needing to be an identical experience from one side to the next. As you come back to center, let's bring the arms back up to the top And we're gonna take an alternating puppet arm. So let's think about the shoulder blade getting to glide out and help you lift that arm up towards the ceiling. So as we're moving, we're not reaching the humerus away. We're letting the scapula glide across the back, and we're using a little bit of those armpit muscles to find a scoop and lift and settling back in. Let's alternate sides and minding your range here. So if it's small, it's small. The objective is not to create a massive movement here. The objective is to move a space that doesn't get to move a lot. Let's take 2 more sets. Making sure your pelvis stays pretty still. So notice that my pelvis is not moving with me as I move my shoulders. So if you find that your pelvis is doing some work for you, scale that movement back so that we can isolate that to the shoulder girdle. Now both arms get to rest heavy. We're gonna bend at the elbows and let's rotate so that the backs of the palms head for the mat behind you. And just rest here and breathe for a moment. Rib cage gets to be as soft as it can, so we're breathing out into that space, and as you exhale, softening that rib cage to the extent that feels natural. Now, let's bring the arms all the way back down to the sides. And we're gonna take a few pelvic curls and pelvic extensions. So we're gently tucking the tail and relaxing that tailbone long, as if your tailbone could lengthen across the mat towards your heels. And we're gonna take that back and forth. And allowing this movement to feel as easeful as it can. So we're not bracing or clenching or tensing in order to make this movement happen. Find the movement that feels natural through your spine. Now, if you've got a tight back or tight hips, this movement's gonna be quite small. So just meet yourself where you're at. Let your range open up naturally for you. And let's take a couple more here. Now in the next one, we're gonna pause with just half of a pelvic curl. So just find a little tilt. We're gonna flex the feet so that you're resting on your heels. And we're gonna start to alternate a clamshell. I'm just gonna take my hair out a little bit. So hands can find your pelvis because they're listening for whether your pelvis is moving or if your legs are moving through the hip joint. And we want the legs to be moving through the hip joint. So the pelvis gets to stay still. Open that leg to the extent that feels doable without bringing your pelvis along for the ride. And then guide that leg back in, and let's take that to the other side. Now we're keeping that slight pelvic tilt as we go, and you're finding how far can I move my femur head within the hip joint without moving my pelvis. While your pelvis may move a little bit, you don't need to be too rigid about it. We don't want the pelvis to be what's moving. And we're gonna take one more time here to each side. And then go ahead and rest your feet back onto the mat, and we're gonna grab our prop. We're gonna place it underneath the sacrum. So let's think about the bony part of the back of the pelvis gets to rest onto the ball. So the ball is not in the arch of your back. So right in that bony part of your pelvis. And let's take a moment, just kind of feel the instability there, whether you want to kind of rock from side to side or find your curl and your extension, but just playing for a moment. And then find a place where we are pretty even across the top, bottom, and side to side of the ball. So we're resting on our neutral to maybe a teeny bit of a curl here. We're not super arched through the back. We're not super tucked through the pelvis. So find that steadiness here on the ball. And we're gonna bring the left leg up into shelf. So that means that we're holding steady on our right, and we're keeping that pelvis steady too. Let's take a heel tap. We're bringing that leg down towards the mat and bringing it back up to the starting point. Now noticing that we're not bending the knee here. We're hinging through the hip. And we're allowing that movement through the hip because we're not moving through the pelvis. We're allowing that movement through the hip because we're not moving through the knee. So we get to isolate that movement here. And that means that our trunk is doing a nice amount of work to keep us stable here. So while this movement may not be very big, it's very productive. Let's take two more here. Now let's add to this. Opposite arm gets to come up. Pause here for a moment. Check out your pelvis. Make sure it's staying steady. We're gonna bring that arm out into a T as we take our heel tap. And drawing both back in. 4 more. And last one. Go ahead and rest everything back down and take a moment to give yourself a little curl and extension over the ball. Not only is kind of a transition, but also to feel, okay, what is it like to find the extremes of those two spaces so that I can better stay in between the two when I'm moving. And let's pause at our neutral pelvis. We're staying steady on the ball, and let's bring that other leg up into shelf. So now we're here with the right leg into shelf. Breathing. Notice what your pelvis wants to do. Are we super sinking over to one side, or are we able to stay pretty even through this space? Let's start our heel tap. And noticing what is doing the moving here. Is your pelvis the one that's moving? Is your knee the one that's moving? And you get to take this at a pace where you can be mindful of your pelvis staying steady and your leg moving through the hip joint. And let's bring the opposite arm up. Take a moment here. Notice your pelvis. One side's gonna feel a little more steady than the other. And let's start to open arm out into a T as we heel tap. 4 more. And last one. Resting that leg back down, take a deep breath. Let's come back to our transition of pelvic curl and pelvic extension. And just gently taking it back and forth between those spaces. And let's start to take a little circling. We're circling around the ball, but in a controlled way so that we're not, flopping the pelvis around over the ball. We have a sense of stability as we gently track around all the spaces of the circle, as if your pelvis is like the face of a clock, and we're traveling around each of the numbers on the face of the clock. Last time around in this direction. And then we'll reverse direction. So taking that around the other way. Just as much control in this direction as the other. And if you find that it's a little tougher to keep control of the movement and you're just kind of jerking around, slow it down, take your time. Now let's come back to neutral. We're even on the ball, neutral to perhaps a little curl. Hands get to stay resting down on the mat, and let's bring one leg into shelf, other leg into shelf, and breathe. Breathe as you stay steady over the ball. We're gonna take a single leg stretch here. So we're gonna extend one leg out, draw it back in, other leg out, and back in. Alternating sides, and staying with the pace that allows you to be steady through the pelvis. Let's take this just a couple more times to each side. And then pause in your shelf, mindfully set one leg down at a time. Let's come to the left leg to extend it out long and take a straight leg lift, lower down, draw it back in. And let's take that again. Let's flex that foot on the way up, point the toe on the way down, gliding in. One more. Other side. Last one. As you glide back in, let's lift off of the ball and go ahead and rest your spine back down on the mat. Set the ball aside for now. We'll come back to it in a moment, but take a moment to find your pelvic curl and pelvic extension. Just kind of notice what that space feels like coming off of the ball. Let's take the next pelvic curl up into a bridge. Articulating up, we're keeping that curled orientation of your pelvis. We're not arched through the back. There's a nice smooth relationship between your rib cage and your pelvis, and we'll melt it all the way back down. Let's take that a few times, just letting your spine move. Now let's bring hands to the back. So the hamstrings, we're gonna come up to a seated position and we're gonna grab our ball again. Now this time we're gonna place that ball right beneath your sternum. Okay, so here we're gonna allow the ball to keep us in a slight chest lift. We can bring the hands around to hold the back of the head. Now, while we're here, make sure the ball feels relatively even across the mat. And let's check out where your pelvis is resting here. So we're not arched through the back here. We're not massively tucked. We're pretty neutral through the pelvis. Hands are easy holding the head. We're not super wide with the elbows. The humerus, the arm bone, has a nice angle within the shoulder joint. So that humeral head is in that angle where you feel like it gets to nest in heavy. So you can notice that if your elbows are wide out to the side, it doesn't have that same connection down into the musculature here. So the angle of our arms is actually helping us use our core more efficiently. So let's breathe here for a moment. Now, without changing the connection between the rib cage and the pelvis, I'll keep one arm out to the side so you can kind of see what's happening through my trunk. We're gonna take our chest over the ball. Now, we're not super flaring the rib cage as we go. We're keeping this connected as we create a little extension through the thoracic spine. And then we're bringing everything all the way back up. Well, let's take that again. It's a small movement. Doesn't need to be very big. But noticing that we're creating movement while staying stable in a certain place. So this movement is within our control. We're stabilizing. Let's take 3 more. Just finding an opening that feels stable for you today. Now on the next one, let's take that over. Find the degree that feels like we're just kind of challenging that stability. And then we're gonna gently use that shape of the ball to come off to the side. We're not picking our pelvis up. We're just finding that movement through the rib cage. We're coming back up to the starting point and we're taking that around to the other side. Again, find a movement that stays in control. So you're staying stable as you're moving. And we're taking this around in a circle. Think about the circle we created through the pelvis and how steady we wanted to be there. We didn't want to be jerking around. We didn't want to be flopping around. Stay within your range of stability. Nice and slow. And so through this movement, we're getting extension, flexion, rotation. We're really inviting a lot of movement through the spine while we maintain stability. So we're creating mobility while we strengthen your body's ability to hold your trunk stable. 2 more times around in this direction. Last time around. Once you reach the top, let's reverse directions. And again, it might feel different in this direction. So you get to stay within what feels stable for you today. 2 more times around. Last one. And then let's pause right at center. Hands can come to the backs of the hamstrings. Gently lift yourself all the way up. Let's take that ball away and let's sit all the way up. We'll lay back down in a moment. Arms can be outstretched in front of you and legs are as wide as your mat. If you want to keep a slight bend in the knee, that's totally welcome. But let's start to take a spine stretch forward. So I want you to imagine, so this is not a hamstring stretch, that we are rounding your spine up and over so that the crown of your head is reaching forward towards your feet. Tailbone gets to reach down towards the mat. I'm feeling like you're just growing right out of your pelvis. And then stacking yourself all the way up tall, hands behind the head, and let's rotate. Find a deep breath at the end of the range. Take that to the other side. Once you come back to center, arms come forward, spine stretch forward. Tailbone reaching down towards the mat as you reach through the crown of your head. And then bringing yourself all the way back up, hands to the back of the head, rotation. One more time to each side. Arms are forward, spine stretch forward. And as you come back up, rotation. As you come back to center, bring your arms forward. Let's bend the knees and go ahead and gently roll as slow as you can, all the way down. Arms can rest at your sides or on your pelvis just to kind of listen. And let's take your bridge again. Pelvic curl up and melting down. Pelvic curl to roll up and melting down. And again, pelvic curl up. Let's hold at the top here. Sink 1/2 of that pelvis down towards the mat. Bring it back up level. Sink the other side. So we're adding in rotation through the pelvis. One more time to each side. And melting all the way back down. Let's extend the right leg out, left leg into shelf, holding your leg behind your hamstring. Extend and bend. Let's hold the next one up, point and flex the foot. Toes get to stay as soft as possible as your heel reaches for the ceiling and slides back down the back of your ankle. Ankle circles. And reversing. Now go ahead and hug that knee in towards your chest, opening your leg out to the side and taking it across, giving yourself a little twist. And again. Go ahead and let that leg relax long, and we're going to take that to the other side, leg in the shelf, extend and bend. Finding whatever straight feels like. So that may not be a perfectly straight leg, it's just the end of your range today. Let's hold the next one at the top. Point and flex that foot. And ankle circles. Reversing. Hug that knee in towards your chest, opening out to the side and taking it across. And again. Both feet can come to the mat, hands to the backs of the hamstrings. Let's come up to a seated position. We're going to turn over onto all fours. Have your ball handy here. One hand gets to find the ball, other hand on the mat, and find your neutral spine. So we're not super arched through the back, nor are we reversing. We're not arched, we're not rounded. We're with our neutral spine, our neutral pelvis, and with one hand on the ball and the other hand on the mat, we're just breathing. You feel your stability here. Let's take our attention to the leg opposite the ball. We're going to extend that leg out and just breathe. Notice how my spine is not changing. Pelvis is not changing. We're going to lift that leg just to the extent that you can keep your pelvis steady and set it back down, glide it back in. We're going to take that a couple times and we're moving slowly so we can notice, are we staying stable or is our spine what's moving? So hip extension, we're dragging that leg out to a straight leg. We're lifting, not at the expense of your spine and trunk organization. Drawing back down, drawing back in. One more. Now go ahead and take the ball away. Let both hands just rest on the mat and notice the difference there. Breathing. Notice how much more stable it feels now that we practice moving with the ball. We're going to take that to the other side. So hand gets to find the ball. Breathing. Check your spine. Check your pelvis. We're drawing that opposite leg out and just breathe here. Notice if your pelvis has super changed or shifted, and then drawing back in. And again, drawing out, and in. Now on the next one, we're gonna draw out, we're gonna lift that leg, not at the expense of your trunk's organization. Rest back down, drawing back in. Two more. Take the ball away. Hands just get to rest down on the mat and breathe. Notice how much easier that feels. So now we're going to put that ball right between our knees. We're going to give it a little hug. You feel like we're using the inner line of the leg, but allowing that inner line of the leg to come all the way up. That little hug to feel like it's coming all the way up through your center. We're going to curl the toes under. We're going to lift the knees to hover and breathe. Lower the knees, long through the feet. You can keep the ball in place here as we just sort of sit back into a child's pose. And let's take that again. Let's go ahead and come up to a kneeling position, curl the toes under, find the little hug of your ball, lift the knees to hover. Resting down, floating it back. Last one. And resting, floating it back. Let's take the ball away. Use the ball to extend your arms all the way out. And we're gonna roll that ball to one edge of the mat and the other. One more time to each side. And the other. Really diving into whatever amount of twist feels good. Back to center. Let's come up to a seated position. And you can just find a cross-legged position, or you can find a Z-sit. And let's bring one hand to the table. If you want to use your ball here, that's totally welcome. And let's take this into a little mermaid, using the ball to glide all the way out. Taking it back. You can take a reverse. And again. Now, if you've got a Z-sit, let's go ahead and switch the legs here. And once again, take that up and over. And reversing. And again, using that ball to glide away if that feels good. And then go ahead and come all the way up. Just take a few steps around the room. And so after we've been moving around, what does it feel like to move around in your body? Maybe you want to take a roll down and notice how your spine moves. Or maybe as you take a walk, you can notice just how your hips are moving, how your spine feels. Nice job. You can be all done for today. And I'll see you back here next time on the Why is Recharge with Us from Home series. Take care.